In the previous spoiler, it was mentioned that 6 people working together finally opened the door to the treasure. Yet, under the overwhelming temptation of the treasure, especially since they came from rival factions, an intense battle broke out instantly. Because teleportation was impossible inside the sacrificial tower, they could only rely on flight to navigate the corridors leading to the core. However, these corridors twisted and turned endlessly, forcing them to constantly make sharp changes in direction at high speed. On top of that, they had to dodge attacks while simultaneously hindering their opponents, which greatly limited their pace. In such an environment, the greatest test was explosive speed and the ability to change direction with agility. In this regard, Luofong held an undeniable advantage. The Sure Wu wings were already a supreme treasure of the space attribute, and when combined with his unique movement technique, they allowed him to remain almost unaffected by the winding corridors. His speed was nearly 10 times that of the others. In the end, he was the first to break into the core region and reached the first treasure chamber ahead of everyone else. But upon seeing the treasure chests forged entirely from G9 grade metal, Luofong quickly realized that with his current strength, he could not possibly break them open by force. With no time to inspect carefully, he had no choice but to collect all the chests into his world ring. What he didn't know, however, was that those seemingly precious chests were all empty. In fact, this was all part of a scheme long prepared by the surviving natives of Yenji continent. Although they had long since hidden away in their divine kingdoms, they deliberately dispatched a mechanical puppet to remain stationed in the monitoring chamber, keeping constant watch over every movement inside the sacrificial tower. Once intruders were detected, the message would be immediately sent back through a divine kingdom channel to inform their clan leader. What the natives had truly been waiting for were foreign powerhouses carrying the trust talismans, so they could use the opportunity to reclaim their clan's true treasures and vital inheritances. In fact, the root of their tragedy lay with the 4 pinnacle races. Competing for resources and territory, the 4 races waged endless wars, where the law of the jungle had long since become the norm. To forge a battlefield suitable for prolonged conflict, Yenji continent had been reduced to nothing more than a sacrifice. Several of the clan's universe venerables, fully aware that they had become targets of the 4 pinnacle races and could not possibly survive, decisively entrusted all of their treasures and secret techniques as inheritances to chosen clansmen, instructing them to flee with the sacrificial towers. However, the outbreak of war had been far too sudden. The natives carrying trust talismans hadn't yet managed to retreat before the combined sweep of divine power unleashed by the universe venerables of the 4 pinnacle races instantly slaughtered them outside the sacrificial tower. The trust talismans were thus scattered, eventually falling into the hands of Luofong and the others. If not for the fact that an immortal-level native had left behind a token in the tower's core and managed to lead a portion of his people back into the divine kingdom in time, they too would have faced certain annihilation. From that point on, the corridors of the sacrificial tower were completely sealed, where without trust talismans, outsiders had no hope of entering, and those inside had no way to escape. Even though the surviving natives could use divine kingdom teleportation to reach the core directly, without the trust talismans they would still be trapped inside the tower and unable to leave. To reach the outside, they would have to do as Luofong and others did, where first they arrive at the military camp base, then teleport onto the battlefield. But the 4 pinnacle races would never allow them such a chance. Thus, the natives could only pin their hopes on fate, waiting for outsiders carrying trust talismans to intrude. The arrival of Luofeng's group seemed to them like the long-awaited hope of revitalizing their people. Through observation, the natives quickly deduced that the 6 intruders belonged to 2 rival factions. Acting decisively, they placed some empty treasure chests back into the treasure chamber to incite infighting, while secretly observing the battles from the monitoring chamber, gathering valuable combat data to better understand their enemies. The core area contained many compartments, and even Luofeng's brief stop was enough for King Purple Bell to conclude that he must have obtained something. King Purple Bell immediately sent word and joined forces with Zvika to find a way to capture Luofong. Luofong responded by unleashing the Mo Yun Vine to block their advance. Though the Mo Yun Vine's level and strength were far inferior to King Purple Bell, a peak-tier king immortal, its massive size, regeneration, and healing ability made it more than sufficient for stalling. To avoid entanglement with the Mo Yun Vine, King Purple Bell also summoned an auxiliary plant lifeform and continued the pursuit. Under the combined assault of King Purple Bell and Zvika, Luofong found himself unable to escape the chamber. King Star Illusion soon arrived and fought side by side with Luofong, the two clashing fiercely with their enemies in a flurry of offensive and defensive techniques. The 4 combatants were roughly evenly matched. Without burning their divine bodies, King Purple Bell and Zvika could only try to delay and hold their opponents, awaiting the arrival of their strongest teammate. As soon as King Songjin, the strongest of the six, a limit King Immortal, arrived, he immediately unleashed his full power in a strike aimed at Luofong. The attack reached nearly the speed of light in an instant, leaving Luofong no chance to dodge. He could only rely on Shi Wu Wing's defense to withstand it. Though the strike carried immense power, it could not breach the protection of Shi Wu Wing's. King Songjin was shocked that even his full force blow had failed to destroy Luofong. At that moment, King Yichun also arrived on the battlefield. King Songjin immediately adjusted his strategy, ordering Zvika to pin down King Star Illusion, while sending King Purple Bell to strike in an attempt to kill Luofong and seize the treasures on him. A fierce battle instantly erupted inside and outside the chamber. With both King Star Illusion and King Yichun being held back, Luofong was left to face King Purple Bell alone. Without hesitation, King Purple Bell controlled a powerful spiritual weapon and unleashed a blazing killing move, like flames devouring everything, smashing toward Luofong and faintly carrying the power of space. However, compared to Shi Wu Wings that could truly control spatial power, this attack was much slower. In the end, Luofeng's agile movement allowed him to dodge every strike, leaving the attacks to fall in vain. King Songjin, who had been monitoring the battle closely, saw that King Purple Bell still could not take down Luofong after such a long time, and could only order him to end the fight quickly. Tempted by the lure of treasure, King Purple Bell had no time to weigh gains and losses. After all, once Luofong escaped the chamber, with his speed, no one would be able to catch him. Even unwilling, King Purple Bell had no choice but to ignite his divine body. In an instant, King Purple Bell's divine power surged, a terrifying wave of energy spreading out in all directions. Without divine power amplification, Luofong was naturally at a disadvantage. Facing an attack whose power had increased 1,000-fold, Luofong had no time to evade and could only take it head-on. Yet even so, under the dual protection of Shi Wu Wings and general great armor, Luofong remained completely unharmed. This meant the battle between the two had already lost all real meaning. One must understand that at King Immortal level and above, if the difference in strength was not great, burning one's divine body to launch an attack only made sense if it could annihilate 3 to 7 times the opponent's divine body. Burning the divine body was equivalent to consuming one's soul. Once overdrawn, not only was recovery extremely difficult, but there was also the risk of falling into eternal slumber. Therefore, unless faced with life or death danger, or the treasure being fought over was worth at least half of one's divine body, King Immortals generally were unwilling to burn more than 1/10 of their divine body in battle. At this moment, even with his divine body burning, King Purple Bell was still unable to harm Luofong. Unless he resorted to stronger methods or sacrificed even more of his divine body, even if he could temporarily suppress Luofong, the battle in the end would remain utterly meaningless. King Yichun, upon seeing Luofeng's astonishing ability to preserve his life, was overjoyed and immediately sent a voice transmission ordering his side to retreat. After all, in terms of overall strength, they were at a disadvantage. On the enemy's side, the strongest combatant, the only limit King Immortal present, King Songjin, felt deeply dissatisfied with his teammates' incompetence. He immediately sent a voice transmission to reallocate the treasure shares. Although King Songjin's demand for 70% of the treasure was domineering, no one dared object, especially since no one could harm Luofong. Once the distribution of treasure was settled, King Songjin decisively ignited his divine body, his power soaring instantly. One must know, when a limit King Immortal burns his divine body, he is capable of unleashing power equivalent to 1,000,000 world masters. Such destructive force was no less than the combined strike of the 1,000,000 Zerg warriors led by Irina. If he were to self-destruct, the resulting energy storm would far surpass even that. Luofeng's side dared not resist and could only focus on retreating. However, King Yichun, who was engaged in combat with King Songjin at close range, had no time to react and was instantly engulfed by King Songjin's attack. Struck by the heavy blow, King Yichun was reduced to dust in a flash. Even though he managed to reform his divine body, having lost 50% of it, his remaining combat strength was only 1/10 of his peak. Though military law forbade King Songjin from directly attacking an ally of the same faction, his desire to monopolize the treasure drove him to relentlessly pursue King Yichun. Even as King Yichun desperately tried to escape, King Songjin forced him step by step into despair, until in the end, the heavily weakened King Yichun had no choice but to self-destruct. This self-detonation swept across the battlefield, its shockwaves especially devastating for King Star Illusion and Zvika, who were much closer, forcing them to endure the violent blast. It is worth mentioning that although Zvika's combat power was extraordinary enough to slay high-tier King Immortals, and even gravely wound peak king immortals, his true comprehension of the laws only placed him at the level of a peak marquee immortal. Faced with an energy storm equivalent to half the combined might of a million world master level Zerg warriors, Zvika was utterly powerless to resist, perishing in terror and despair. As for King Star Illusion, also a peak king immortal, though he lost a portion of her divine body due to the explosion, her overall combat strength remained unaffected. With the loss of one peak king immortal on Luofeng's side, their overall power plummeted. Seizing the moment when King Purple Bell was still reforming his divine body, Luofong took the chance to flee toward the outside of the sacrificial tower. King Purple Bell and King Song Jin immediately gave chase. In their eyes, the treasure was on Luofong, and under no circumstances could he be allowed to escape. Are you curious why Luofong did not rely on Irina to counterattack? The reason is simple: the combined strike of a million world master level Zerg warriors at most could severely injure a peak king immortal, and only with some luck might it cause their demise. But the strength of a limit king immortal is at least 10 times greater than that of a peak king immortal, more than enough to withstand such joint assaults. Thus, to King Song Jin, an attack of this scale posed virtually no real threat. More critically, the corridor space was narrow, and the chain reaction from an explosion could not distinguish friend from foe, sweeping in all directions. Since it could not harm King Song Jin, if Luofong stayed behind to resist the energy storm, he would miss his best chance to escape, and his human body would certainly be destroyed. Once his human body perished, all of his treasures, including the World Ring, would fall into King Song Jin's hands. Meanwhile, the confined corridor limited the massive body of the golden horned beast, preventing it from unleashing its full power to reclaim the treasures. Therefore, escape was without doubt Luofeng's wisest choice. The native inhabitants, who had been secretly observing the battle, saw that King Song Jin not only collected all the perished powerhouse's treasures but also took the trust talismans. If King Song Jin and the others left the corridor barrier, the natives might forever lose their clan's true treasure and inheritance. At this critical moment, the strongest among them, Xiao Chika, decisively revealed himself to stop the group from leaving. Xiao Chika also possessed peak king immortal strength, and by revealing himself he would not be instantly slain, which gave him the chance to negotiate. He then mixed lies within the truth. When the others learned that burning divine bodies had only been for the sake of fighting over empty chests, they were enraged, especially King Purple Bell and King Song Jin, who had already consumed parts of their divine bodies. To obtain the true treasure, they reluctantly chose to cooperate with Xiao Chika, albeit half doubtfully, for no one could be absolutely certain of his words. Xiao Chika led the group through hidden passages until they arrived at the true treasure chamber, where he demanded a talisman to open the chamber door. To guard against treachery, King Song Jin first had King Purple Bell attempt to open the door with the talisman. When that failed, only then did he hand it to Xiao Chika. What the others did not know was that once Xiao Chika obtained the talisman, he could command the sacrificial tower's intelligence system and claim it fully as his own. Soon after, Xiao Chika used a pretext to ask for a second talisman, secretly coordinating with the system so that when the chamber door was opened, the talisman would remain outside. The plan advanced smoothly. As the chamber door opened, Xiao Chika rushed in first, using himself as bait. The others, puzzled by his intent, immediately followed to prevent him from monopolizing the treasure. At the very moment they entered the chamber, Xiao Chika decisively ordered the tower's intelligence to seal the door and signaled his clansmen in the monitoring room to retrieve the talisman outside. In this way, the natives could obtain inheritance from another hidden chamber and, guided by it, pursue possible future glory. Yet this remained only their wishful dream. After all, even under the protection of several universe venerables, they had been unable to escape annihilation. How much less so without guardians now? It is worth mentioning that unlike other chambers, the chamber where the real treasure is stored, including its door, is made of G9 grade metal and cannot be destroyed by any strong person present. In the case of space lockdown and the inability to teleport, the only way to leave the chamber is to rely on the Divine Kingdom teleportation. However, as long as Xiao Chika is still present, everyone will subconsciously think that they still have a chance to obtain the treasures and leave smoothly. In order to ensure the smooth flow of the plan, Xiao Chika decisively sacrificed himself and blew himself up to end his life. The immortal self-detonation power of the Peak King Immortal was already comparable to the combined blow of the million world master level Zerg warriors, not to mention that it happened in a closed and narrow G-class chamber. The terrifying energy storm was further condensed and instantly swept through the entire chamber. The King Star Illusion instantly lost more than 50% of her divine body, and her strength dropped significantly, and it was almost impossible to even kill a Marquis Immortal. Under the protection of Shi Wu Wings and general-grade armor, even if the power of the explosion was weakened by more than 90%, the remaining wave still instantly shattered the comrades condensed by Mo Yun Vine, causing Luofong to lose 80% of his body in an instant. Fortunately, the inner world of Golden Horned Beast is abundant in energy, and it is proportionate to the human split, and it instantly repairs all injuries. In addition to King Song Jin, King Purple Bell was also unharmed. After the aftermath of the explosion dissipated, everyone tried various means, but they were unable to open the treasure chest, and even the metal chain that bound the chest could not be destroyed. King Song Jin had previously burned his divine body to kill King Yichen, but now the treasure was in front of him but could not be obtained. How could he endure returning in vain? Under this powerful and terrifying explosion, King Purple Bell and Luofong were unscathed. Obviously each had a powerful treasure. For Luofong from the hostile camp, King Song Jin had no affection for him. Although the King Purple Bell belongs to the same automaton camp, he comes from different races, and greed has driven King Song Jin to completely ignore the meaning of the alliance. In addition, the special magnetic field of the sacrificial tower blocks the connection of the military systems, and King Song Jin can easily manipulate light and sound, making simple video recordings completely ineffective. In this situation, he made a decisive move and launched an attack on King Purple Bell and Luofong, and the war flared up again. King Star Illusion, who had seriously lost part of her divine body, could not burn the divine body to fight at all, so she could only choose to self-destruct. But compared with Cho Chika's self-detonation, the energy impact of the King Star Illusion was at least 70% weaker, and there was almost no threat to the rest of the people present. Though enemies, the disadvantaged King Purple Bell and Luofong had no choice but to join forces against King Song Jin, whose strength surpassed theirs tenfold. Seeking a sliver of survival, King Purple Bell signaled Luofong to fight side by side and give his all. Yet, what King Purple Bell did not know was that Luofong was merely a world master, who had no divine body to ignite at all. Seeing that Luofong refused to expend divine power, King Purple Bell realized he could not rely on him to defeat King Song Jin and decisively chose to use his trump card. King Song Jin never expected that King Purple Bell carried a heavy-grade treasure. While trapping both King Song Jin and Luofong within it, King Purple Bell activated a Fire God Origin crystal, whose might was several times greater than the self-detonation of a Peak King Immortal. Controlling the treasure to restrain the two and compress the explosive energy to its utmost, he unleashed it toward King Song Jin, magnifying the destructive force tenfold in an instant. Faced with a cataclysm far stronger than the combined strike of millions of World Master-level Zerg warriors, King Song Jin knew he could not endure it. He had no choice but to self-destruct, hoping in his final retaliation to drag everyone present down with him. As the energy within the treasure surged wildly, King Purple Bell was forced to burn his divine body, pushing the treasure's power to its limit to bind the force and hurl it in a single direction. The two explosions collided, their combined might surpassing even the ordinary attack of a low-tier universe venerable. The blast not only tore through the chamber floor but shattered thousands of kilometers of terrain. Though the treasure chest and its chains remained intact, the destruction of the ground caused the chest to lose its anchoring and plummet into the lower levels. Seeing both King Song Jin's legacy and the treasure chest falling, King Purple Bell, despite losing over 20% of his divine body, was overjoyed. Such wealth would allow him not only to purchase vast amounts of materials to restore his divine body but also to exchange for higher-tier secret techniques and powerful weapons, drastically boosting his strength. Yet, something strange occurred. As King Purple Bell followed the trail of scattered loot, gathering item after item, he found no sign of the treasure chest. Even King Song Jin's many treasures had vanished mysteriously. He could never have imagined that all of these had already been swept into Luofeng's world ring. Because Luofong had never died. The moment the energy storm surged, he had retreated into his inner world, hiding the world ring containing the life core inside Shi Wu Wings. Luofong had specifically commissioned this world ring with exceptionally strong defenses where such explosions could not harm it in the slightest, let alone when further shielded by the Shi Wu Wings. As the treasures plummeted, Luofong immediately switched to his Masha clan clone and disguised himself as a fragment of G-grade metal, sweeping all the surrounding treasures into his possession and leaving King Purple Bell with far less than expected. Luofong could hardly believe it, he had actually become the ultimate winner of this treasure battle. Yet, new troubles awaited him. The issue was that every strong being who had witnessed King Purple Bell's trump card had been killed by him. For the heavy-grade treasure in King Purple Bell's hands to unleash its full might, it had to be paired with the Fire God Origin Crystal's devastating explosion. But if an enemy were to learn of this trump card in advance and simply keep their distance, King Purple Bell would be unable to bind his opponent and thus lose the means to kill them in the same manner. So, would King Purple Bell choose to ally with other powerhouses to kill Luofong, just to keep his secret hidden? Could Luofong manage to escape the sacrificial tower unscathed? Stay tuned for the next spoiler, and I'll reveal it all. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching this video. Wish you a wonderful day.